I'm Still Here is set in 1970s Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, during the country's military dictatorship. The movie follows the Paiva family, led by Eunice Paiva, played by Fernanda Torres, and Rubens Paiva, played by Selton Mello. In 1964, a military coup successfully overthrew the government in Brazil and concentrated most of the government's power into the armed forces and appointed their own president. By 1974, President Ernesto Geisel slowly integrated a plan to re-democratize the country. The ruling party at that time was not officially overturned until the general elections of 1985. During this time between 1964 and 1985, the unfortunately expected humanitarian crimes the government was committing against its own people were swept under the rug. One of the most publicized crimes after the fact were the disappearances and killings of political opponents to the regime. Several hundred cases were opened to find these people, and this movie follows the real story of how Rubens Paiva's disappearance affected his family. Now, if you haven't already seen my video for my top 10 movies of 2024, this was one of my favorite movies from last year. I got to talk a little bit about it there, and I wanted to talk about it more in an actual review. I'm Still Here is directed by Walter Salles and is an adaptation of Marcello Rubens Paiva's book of the same name. I have only seen one other movie of Walter Salles', and that is the 1998 film Central Station, which funnily enough stars Fernanda Torres' mother, Fernanda Montenegro, who also makes an appearance in this movie. It has been a couple years since I saw that movie, but I remember enjoying it quite a bit. I'm Still Here makes me a fan of Salles through and through. The main thing this movie gets right is its approach to its subject matter. There are moments of anxiety and paranoia and a through line of tension in the movie, but it never feels like those aspects are played up for melodrama. It respects its subject matter and structures the story very, very well. The first act is focused on painting a picture of what life is like in the Paiva family during this time. The second act focuses on the incident and Eunice's attempt to gather information about Ruben's disappearance. And the third act goes somewhere I didn't expect it to and focuses on how this event rippled through the rest of Eunice and her family's lives. Salles does a really good job at immersing the audience in the time period. The costume and set design is believable, along with some small details added in that does enhance the story by immersing you in some very dated things of that era, like the girls sunbathing while using Coca-Cola to help them tan. This movie was shot on 35mm film, and it's specifically used to emulate how films shot on 35mm looked in the 70s. The color grading is also beautiful. One of the biggest talking points when it comes to award season this year is Fernanda Torres' performance, and it is extremely well-deserved. I'm not going to act like I was very familiar with her work, but as of right now, out of all the Best Actress nominees at the Oscars this year, she is my favorite. This movie relies very heavily on Fernanda's performance, as the story relies very heavily on Eunice. There are several moments throughout of subtle acting that were very affecting to me. It's a movie where I found myself emotional for the entire last 45 minutes of it. And one scene in particular that hits home the theme of the movie is where the Paiva family returns to a restaurant they went to earlier in the movie. Eunice catches a glimpse of the other families enjoying themselves, and we all feel the loss she is feeling. Fernanda plays this with a lot of reservation. It's a small scene, but it's been used a lot in the movie's promotional material because of its impact. The acting from the rest of the movie is also great. While Selton Mello has limited screen time as Rubens, he is believable in his role and works well within the family dynamic. He has good chemistry with Fernanda. The biggest surprise for me was the acting from the kids. The Paiva family had 5 children at this time, and none of the actors feel out of place. A big aspect of telling this story is translating the believability of this family to the audience, and I think it's done really well here. This home feels very lived in. These relationships feel very lived in. Specifically, the performance from the daughter who is arrested with Eunice. The mother-daughter relationship between those two is endearing and heartbreaking with how events play out. A lot of the writing here is subtle, and the movie moves in its restraint most of the time. The movie starts with some unease with the military so close at hand in Rio. The second act begins with men suddenly calling upon Rubens to come with them and more or less invading their home. After this, Eunice and one of her daughters are also detained to be interrogated. Eunice Paiva spent 12 days in prison being questioned. Upon release, she immediately starts looking for answers for the whereabouts of Rubens. We, along with the Paiva family, watch these events unfold with frustration. The moments in the prison and when the men enter the home are palpably tense. The feeling of powerlessness is very present here. It speaks to the regime and what it's like to be under one of those regimes. It was an era of fear of the government, and Eunice's fruitless search becomes exhausting to watch at times. She is tasked with keeping the family together and trying to pull everything back to the way it was. I'm not going to spoil the specifics of the movie, but considering the real life aspect of the story, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the lives of this family were ruined by Brazil's government, to say the least. And of course, if a family member disappears without an explanation for a long time, it would shake anyone in the proximity to that event to their core. It's a horrific situation, and the lack of answers is the point of the movie, which makes this one of the most important movies to watch this year. The third act chooses to jump forward in time to touch upon different parts of Eunice's life after this. It doesn't have a climax in traditional sense because that's not what happened. There's no third act showdown. Life just has to go on, regardless. And I thought this was the best choice the movie could have made. While I don't have many negative criticisms of this movie, my biggest issue with it was some of the pacing. A large chunk of the latter part of the second act does feel like it moves a good deal slower than the other parts of the movie. And while I'd rather them focus on authenticity of the storytelling over entertainment, you do feel the runtime in moments. But this movie has stuck with me since I saw it. I think these stories are important to tell, and as of right now, it is my favorite movie from the Best Picture lineup at the Oscars for this weekend. While I don't expect it to walk away with anything other than maybe Best Foreign Language Film, the fact that it made it in as a Best Picture nominee along with Fernanda's nomination is surprising and awesome to see. If you want to look more into this subject matter, another movie that I think would be a good companion piece for this film is a documentary called Nostalgia for the Light from 2010. It's a documentary that I would highly recommend for anyone to see regardless, but its similarity in subject matter made me want to bring it up. I think you should go watch it. I think this movie speaks to the human condition, and it speaks to how these events can affect people's lives no matter how much you want to ignore it, that we should know our history and we should learn from our history so we don't repeat these awful things that happened. I think as far as telling real life events, it is probably the most important movie of the year to see. I originally intended for this movie to be rated as an A-, but while writing this review and with the sheer importance of the subject matter, I do think it ekes itself up just a little bit. So I will be rating I'm Still Here an A. What did you guys think of it? What is your favorite foreign language film pick from the Oscar nominations this year? I was also a fan of The Girl with the Needle. Let me know, and I'll be back with another video.